Okay, so we're recording now. So let's get started. First of all, welcome and thank you for coming today. I realize it's Friday and your weekend has started. So I'll try to be as brief as possible, but obviously giving you all the information that you need so you can put in a successful application for the program. All right, let me share my screen again. Okay, so what we're going to cover in this is I'm going to give you an overview of the scheme so you can get a good sense of what it is, what it includes, and more importantly, what it isn't, so you don't get any wrong impressions. We're also going to have a look at the different sections of the application form. Have either of you had a chance to have a look at the application form? Okay, good. So this will be helpful then. So the application form, as you probably know, is at the bottom of the AARMS webpage. And you'll need to complete this in order for to be considered for the scheme. And as I said earlier, any questions that you have, you can ask me during the presentation, and anything you don't think I've covered, then by all means ask me at the end of this presentation. Okay, so let's move on. Let's see if I can move on. Okay, so let me just move that up a little bit for you. Okay, so the key headline, so this is what's involved. There are funds of up to 18 lakh available. So in this year's AARMS, we have 14 mentors, and they're working in groups of 9. So there's 9 groups with 14 mentors. And collectively, they're working with about 86 teachers. So some mentors have got 3 teachers and some mentors have up to 10 teachers. So the money that you ask for will probably be dependent upon how many mentees that you have. And the role that you will take is that you will mentor the teachers that you choose as they conduct classroom-based research. And as you probably would have noticed from the poster, that you should encourage your teachers to explore 4 themes in the classroom. And we've tried to keep these themes as broad as possible, so there's as much opportunity for them to take ownership of them. So the 4 themes are assessment, multilingual education, innovation and ICT, and 21st century skills. During the course of the program, you'll have 3 face-to-face events where we'll put all the AARMS mentors together. So the first event would be an induction workshop where you all get to meet each other and the mentor who's going to be supporting you. We'll also be having a symposium at halfway point of the scheme where you will do a presentation and again get to work with all your mentors. And then the last point, as you'll see here, is that you'll share your findings and experiences in a public forum. For this group of mentors that we've got for 17-18, we're going to be doing a classroom-based research Mela here in Delhi. So we'll probably be doing something similar for 18-19. Okay, and then the benefits of AARMS are it's an opportunity for you to play a key role in helping teachers grow, learn, and transform their teaching practice and understanding of what is happening in their classroom. It's also an opportunity for you to develop and strengthen your mentoring and research skills. You'll also gain project management experience because you'll need to plan your activities. You'll be writing quarterly reports for us based on what you're doing. You'll also get extensive feedback and mentoring support from an ELT classroom research specialist from India. We're doing the application process for that. So right now we don't know who that is. At the moment on the 17-18 scheme, we have 2 mentors. And that might be the same again on the 18-19 scheme. And it's also an opportunity for you to widen your professional network. The 14 mentors that we're currently working with come from across India, and they've formed a WhatsApp group and they chat fairly regularly with each other and share what they're learning. So you'll also widen your network of teachers too. So, okay, so now so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through the application form section by section. I think the application form has a total of, let me see how many sections there are. Okay, there are 8 sections, so I've got a slide for each section. So section 1, it's an opportunity for you to talk about your previous work mentoring a group of teachers, or just working with a group of teachers. It doesn't have to be mentoring. And what you need to put in this box is you need to think about, you need to tell us, was your experience formal or informal? So when we say it's formal, that you were asked to do it, that you were asked to participate in a group, and it was being overseen perhaps by somebody else. If it was informal, it may have been something you and a group of teachers decided to do something, to work on something, and therefore it wasn't overseen by anybody else. It's also important to tell us how many teachers you've worked with in the group, what the goal of the group was, what were you trying to achieve together. Give us some information about what your role was in the group. Did you take a leadership type role? Were you a motivating force in the group? Were you the one that put processes into the group so everybody was organized and knew what they were doing? And then think about what types of activities were you doing in that group? Were you meeting on a regular basis? Were you sharing materials? Were you documenting each other and what you were doing? So think about what activities you were doing in your group. And then it's also really interesting for us to see in applications what successes you had as a group, but also what challenges that you had as a group. And I don't think you should look at problems, particularly in an application, or challenges as something to be afraid of or embarrassed by, because those are the things where the most learning occurs. And if we see that you had a challenge that you learned from and that you could apply that learning when you take on this mentor role, that would be really valuable information for us. Any questions there? If not, I'm going to move on. Okay, I'm going to move on to section 2. So the opening sections, I think, are quite easy. So section 2 is based on your previous experience or your interest in classroom-based research. We're quite aware that, it's quite hard to find time to do classroom-based research, but we understand quite a lot of people have, a significant interest in it. So we're happy to see if you're able to detail your experience, if you've got some. And if you haven't, then by all means, tell us why you're interested in it. So if you've got experience in classroom-based research, then the kind of information that we're going to be looking for is, we want to know, what was your action research project about? What did you explore in your classroom? Was it a problem that you were facing with your students? Was it a challenge that you couldn't quite understand? Or maybe you wanted to understand why something was working. All of those points are equally valid and worthy of exploration in the classroom. And then what kind of plan did you develop? Like, what kind of time period did you give yourself? What kind of activities were you thinking of trying to do that you wanted to try out? And then how did you collect the data that helped you understand what was going on in your classroom? So the data that you could have collected may have been through tests, may have been through interviews, questionnaires, it may have been through the students' notebooks, their homework. And then how did you analyze it? Like, what tools did you give? Were you looking for patterns? If so, how did you create that? And then how did you record what you were finding? Maybe you were noting things down in a journal, maybe you were making a video diary of what you were doing. And then obviously, when you're doing classroom-based research, what did you find out? What did you learn? How did what you researched change what you were doing? And that's also another thing to think about when you're doing classroom-based research. Like, how did it change your teaching? How did it change your understanding of the classroom environment? Did your students learn? Did it improve the learning outcomes in your students? Did your students develop more awareness? What came out of the process? And then I think it's really nice to have this information in your application about what's because of this process that you went, what specific skills and knowledge do you think you can bring if you're going to mentor teachers as they do classroom-based research? And try and be specific there. If you haven't got any experience of doing classroom-based research, then it's really important that you try and tell us, like, why you're interested in it. Where does your interest come from? What's inspiring you to do this? What advantages or opportunities do you think this process is going to give you? And again, try and tell us what skills and knowledge you think that you have. Maybe you've been teaching for a long time, maybe you've been keeping journals over the years. You know, what can you bring that's going to help support the teachers you're going to mentor as they conduct classroom-based research? Do you have any questions there? Okay, let's move on to the next slide then. Okay, so this is quite a tricky section, and I think I'm aware that when you're putting your application together, you might not have all the names of your teachers. Okay, Deepak, yeah, you've got a question? Fire away. I saw you raised your hand, Deepak. Do you have a question? Use the chat box if you do. Okay, I'm going to continue. If you've got your question, just put it in the chat box and I can answer it. Hi, Xavier. Thanks for joining. I've just seen you joined. Okay, so section three even, is about identifying your teachers, their teaching context, and their current level of experience in classroom-based research. Last year when we looked at applications, some people were able to tell us about individual teachers, and others talked about teachers they didn't name them, but they said what subject they were teaching or even what school they were in. So you don't have to give us specific information, but it's really good if you can tell us how many teachers you're planning to work with. And so how many teachers you're planning to work with. And if you're going to, and we do accept joint applications. So if you're thinking of mentoring with another teacher and supporting, then that's fine. But I think if you're going to do a joint application, then I think you've got to think about maybe mentoring 5 or 6 teachers. If you're going to be alone and doing it, it'll be your first time doing it, then try not to give yourself too big a group. I think 3 or 4 teachers is quite a lot of work. And then think about what each teacher will bring to the group. Think about their experience, their knowledge, what skills they have, and what attitude that they're going to bring that's going to really help your group dynamic. Remember that you're going to be working together for 12 months. And the initial part is quite easy, but there is quite a bit of a workload. So they've got to be motivated and committed. And then it's also important to tell us, what's their place of work. If you can name the school, that's great. If you tell us what district it is in, what type of school it is, whether it's like a private school, a model school, a government school, and whether it's primary or secondary. Just also bear in mind that the teachers that you work with, there has to be an English component to it. So you can either work, and you can have a mixed variety. So you can work with teachers that are teaching English as a subject, but you can also be working with teachers who teach, for example, maths or science, but they teach using English. So whatever teachers you identify, they've either got to be teaching English as a subject, or they teach their subject in English. No, it doesn't have to be a school. If you're thinking of maybe it's in higher education, maybe it's a college, maybe it's an informal out-of-school volunteer program, that's fine too. As long as there's teaching and they're teachers and they're teaching using English or they're teaching English as a subject. That's fine, Deepak. Okay, if we, yeah, that's fine as long as your teachers, Deepak, that's fine as long as your teachers are teaching, as long as English is the medium language of instruction. That's definitely doable. And then if we look into the last column here, the level of experience. So it's nice to tell us what level of experience your teachers have. So you can either say they have a lot of experience, some experience, and no experience. There's no judgment there at all. Your application is not going to be looked unfavorably if all your teachers have no experience. In fact, it's probably easier for you as a mentor if they don't have any experience, because they won't have any preconceived ideas of what they think should be happening. But keep in mind that what you put here, in terms of that level of experience, keep in mind that what you put there will inform what type of support you're going to put and what sort of activities you're going to do with your group. If you're working with a group that have already got quite a lot of experience of doing classroom-based research, then you're going to have a lighter touch in terms of support compared to working with 4 teachers who have never done it before, where the level of support you're going to give is going to be a much more intensive. Okay, so I'm going to move on now to the next slide. I think I'm going to have to drink water between every slide. Okay, so section 4. So section 4 is about which thematic areas, so we talked a little bit about them earlier, which thematic areas you expect your mentoring group to explore. And don't think that with your teachers, they all have to explore, for example, assessment. You're working with 4 teachers and they're all exploring assessment. When you're thinking about the teachers that you want to work with and you're doing your application, then this is something that you can talk to them about, like which of those 4 areas are they interested in exploring in their classroom, or they want to develop, or, you know, get more proficient in. So let them decide that. And again, it's just to give us a rough idea in terms of the application process. But what we found when we've started the scheme with the 17-18, yes, the 17-18 group, some of their teachers changed their ideas about what they wanted to do, and that is absolutely fine. This is just to give us a broad understanding of the kind of numbers of how many teachers are doing what. But it's perfectly okay if your application gets accepted for that to change and shift. But it's just to give, and it's also quite a nice starting ground to kind of get teachers thinking about what's going to be involved, and, you know, kind of getting them to start thinking about what's happening in their classroom. So while you've got those 4 assessments, there are key things to think of, as you'll see with my little warning sign at the bottom of the slide. So things to keep in mind when you're doing this. Be specific. What aspect of the theme is the teacher keen to explore? So if you look at the coloured boxes on that slide, I just put a few ideas there of the kinds of things that teachers might want to think about. But that's entirely up to you and the teacher to work out together. And how applicable is that theme to the school's context? So for example, if a teacher wants to explore ICT, but they've got no resources themselves and there's nothing in their school, then it's going to be very tricky for them to manage. So it might not be a good idea. So there might need to be some talking between you and your potential teachers about what's probable. And I've said the other 2 points already. The teachers don't have to do the same theme, and there's flexibility as well. Because what you'll find, if I go on to the next slide. So in the next slide, it says, how are you going to provide mentoring support to the teachers? And what is the group hoping to achieve by the end of the project? So when you're talking about mentoring support, the kind of things you want to be thinking about are things like meetings. How are you going to do those meetings? Are you going to do it one-to-one? Are you going to do it as a group? Or are you going to do a mixture of the two? Are you going to do counselling sessions? Are you going to do workshops with them? Are you going to do input sessions where you're giving information? Are you going to do classroom observations to see what's going on and how they're managing? And then again, how often are you going to do those things? Are you going to meet them on a weekly, monthly, fortnightly basis? And this is the kind of stuff we want to see in your plan. Also, think about what you want to achieve, what's going to be the outcome of your project, and think carefully about that. Like, what are you hoping to achieve with this group of teachers? Are you hoping to improve student learning? Are you hoping to give them a learning experience? Are the teachers trying to understand a certain behaviour? Are you trying to develop more student-centred classrooms? Are you trying to get the teachers you're working with to develop or enhance their reflective skills? Or maybe you just want to help teachers change their attitudes to research and see it as not something that's, lofty and all very academic, but it's something teachers can participate in and get real understanding of their profession and their classroom. And then it's also nice if you can tell us about the communication channels you're thinking of using. And again, this isn't set in stone. So what our teachers are currently using with their mentors are quite a wide variety of things. Some are using Skype because they're not in the same location as their mentees are. All the mentors have set up WhatsApp groups with their teachers where they share information. They've created like a Facebook group as well where they share photos, videos, materials. You can also use Padlet, which is a really nice, I don't know what the right word is there. Sort of like a notice board where you can pin things and pin ideas and everybody can look at it and comment on it. Or you can use things like Zoom, what we're using right now. That's a great platform as well to communicate and share ideas. If we move on now to section 6. So section 6 is probably the most, it's something you really have to take your time and think about. So what will you and your team members do and what you hope to achieve in each month of the project? So as you'll have noticed, the scheme runs for 12 months. It will be from April 2018 to March 2019. And what we've tried to do, and this is really more for your benefit, but we found with our last cohort that some of them, the planning has shifted depending on their teachers and whether their teachers have got exams. So there is an element of flexibility, but in terms of the application, this is just a structure for us to see how well you've thought through your plans and what you want to achieve. So in the first 3 months, normally what happens is you're going to do pre-planning activities. So this is an opportunity in the first 3 months for you and your members in your group to kind of look at the level of experience, look at what needs they might have and how you can meet their needs. And this might be something that you'll be discussing and working out as you go along. I think you've also got to be realistic about how much time you're going to need with your group to kind of introduce the idea of classroom-based research, to introduce the principles. And also it's a time to kind of figure out what they want to look at, what they want to explore. And I think that's I've called it pre-planning, but I think it's also, you should really look at it as an exploratory time, giving time for teachers to really think about what they want to do. And it's also the time you'll get your mentees to start putting together their questions. So, and for some groups, it will take longer than others, depending upon the teachers. So think about that when you're putting in your plan. And then in the next 6 months are normally focused on data collection. So you've got to think about data collection tools, both for you, because you're going to be collecting data on your mentees and how your mentoring experience is going. And you've also got to help your teachers decide, what's going to be the best data collection tool to help them answer the question that they've got. So, you're going to have to talk them through and help them with their putting together questionnaires, maybe, journals. Maybe they're going to look at lesson planning and evaluations of their lessons. Maybe they're going to be looking at tests, creating tests. Maybe they're going to conduct interviews and focus groups with their students. And maybe they're going to ask you to come and observe, or maybe they're even going to get peers to come and observe. So it's about compiling all of that data. And then what comes after that data collection phase is the collation and analysis. And you've got to think about what you're going to need to do. What kind of support are you going to be able to offer during that process? And that's got to be documented. So how are they going to be recording and organizing the data? What methodology are they going to use to analyze their data? and what are you going to do with your teachers to support them through that process. So maybe in your first 3 months you'll be doing lots of group work, but maybe at that stage it's going to become a lot more individualized, because they've all probably got different questions they've been doing. Maybe they're probably using different methodology, which has yielded different data, and you might have to work with them in a different way during that phase of the program. And then the last part, which is probably the fun part, is about thinking about the presentation, of how the teachers you're working with are going to do an overall presentation of what they've learned by doing classroom-based research. And I think what's not expected, although it's up to you and the teachers you work with, is what we're trying to move away from is some sort of academic, detailed, heavy report that's not going to be, not that it's not going to be read, it's just that I think basically what you're trying to do. Yes, Dr. Manisha, I see you've raised your hand. If you want to ask a question, use the chat box. That's fine. Ask away. Manisha, I'm going to keep talking. If you write your question, I'll answer it when it pops up on the screen, okay? So in terms of the presentation, what we're encouraging the mentors and mentees we're working with at the moment is to try and be as innovative and creative as possible. So maybe they want to put together a poster presentation, maybe they want to make a video, maybe they're going to do a PowerPoint presentation. There's lots of different ways for that to be done, and I want it to be as a creative process as possible, both for you and the teachers you work with, but also more importantly, that it's accessible. Because I think, particularly in teaching, although we may all be on our own in the classrooms, we fundamentally got the same job, and whatever classroom-based research the teachers have been doing, other teachers might benefit from that. So think about that when you're putting together how you think it's all going to be presented. How can you get what? I don't understand. How can you get? I'm going to continue. Yeah, so try and think about that. Try and think about it being accessible to other teachers, and that other teachers will want to read it, will want to watch it, will want to listen to it. I mean, your presentation could even be like a podcast or an audio recording of something. But it's also very important, I'm just going to scroll down a little bit, that this section has to tie into your budget, so that we have to see that whatever you're planning the activities, that you've accounted for that in terms of the money that you're going to want to ask for. Okay? The money part. Okay, so I'm going to go to the next slide. I'm going to close the chat box down a little bit. So, okay, so we come into section 7 now. So this is quite a tricky part of the application. So, take some time to think about this. So this is about how you're going to evaluate whether the aims that you've put in I think section 4 are going to be achieved. So you've got to make sure that the different sections of your application, though separate, they do have to be coherent. There does have to be a link there, so that we can see that the money you've asked for example, is realistic. Yeah, you'll be able to get the recording of the webinar when I've finished. I won't stop, it's recording right now, and when it's stopped, you'll be able to access it. I'm going to put it on the webpage, so don't worry about that. I understand you've missed stuff, but you'll be able to catch up. Okay, so let's move that down to the bottom. No problem. Okay, so you've got to think about, what are the aims? So a useful starting point could be looking at this in terms of your aims as a mentor. So the key focus, so it's almost like you've got two focuses going on. There's the focus where you're working with the mentees, the teachers you're working with, but it's also a reflective process for you. What are you learning about being a mentor to teachers who are doing classroom-based research? What do you want to get out of the process? What's your aim? So what do you want to learn? What do you want to achieve? What do you want to develop? And then you've got to think about your teachers. What do they want to develop? Do they want to develop their learning about the profession? Do they want to develop their teaching skills? So really try to think about that. And then you've got to look at how you plan to monitor that. So you've got to keep a constant eye on that. And that's why the 4 phases can be useful, because they can be useful checkpoints for you to check in to see whether you're on track. So when you're putting your plan together, look at each of those phases and think theoretically, of course, because you don't know what's going to happen when you actually start the process. But look at the main idea of what you want to achieve in each section and how can you monitor that. And then also look at the data collection tools in section 6 and how effectively they can be deployed, and how you can make sure that they're working and they're robust and they're being useful. And then you've also not just got to monitor, but you also got to evaluate your success. So looking at the achievements of what you and the group of teachers that you're working for. So you might want to get feedback from teachers, from the students the teachers are working with, and maybe from the mentors who are going to be supporting you. You're also going to use the data that you've been collecting over the program to help you understand what you've learned and what's been challenging. And all of this will help you support your claims. So for example, you could say that out of the process, you've learned how to motivate teachers when you can see that they're struggling, and the skills that you developed as a mentor around motivation. So where's your evidence to say that you've been able to effectively motivate your teachers? So what have you been collecting throughout the process to support that idea? So again, if I just scroll down a little bit, so you can see that I've got my little warning sign there at the bottom. So really make sure in this section that you're looking at project outcomes you wrote in section 5. This will really help you formulate your aims. You're also going to need to look at what you've put in section 6, because this will also inform what goes in here as well. So really make sure there are clear links between the sections. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next slide. So this is the money part. Okay, so budget. What are you going to spend your funds on? So the key things for you to think about are, how many teachers are you going to be working with? What types of support do you have in place, and how often will you be doing them? For example, are you going to be doing workshops? If you're going to do workshops, what kind of things are you going to need in your workshop? How much is that going to cost you? And think about what other activities do you have planned and how much they're going to cost you. So really start to think about the money side of things and try and get it right. Okay, so it's also important for you to understand what the funds cannot be used for. The money that you're going to request from us will not be to pay for your time. And it will not be, we will not consider applications where you're costing for your teacher's time. We will give you any reimbursement for your personal costs, but they have to be related to the scheme, not to something where it's just something that you're doing for yourself. So the types of activities that you can claim money for will be your pre-project work, kind of setting things up, the materials that you're going to need. So think about photocopying, printing, all of that kind of thing. Thinking about equipment hire that you might have to use to work with your mentees. Think about the venue costs that you might have to pay for. If you're working with a big group of teachers, maybe you need to go somewhere specific. Think about phone and internet credit. If you're going to be meeting your teachers over, I don't know, Skype or something, making sure that the funds are available for that. And maybe there's travel involved. Maybe you're working with teachers working in different blocks in a district, so making sure that you can pay for them to come to your meetings. Or that you need to go and see them, that you can cost for that as well, to pay for your travel to go and see the teachers that you're working with. And again, if you're putting workshops on, think about maybe your teachers will need to stay overnight, so budgeting for accommodation. Maybe you're going to need to feed them or give them some refreshment, so costing for that. Thinking about all the materials, venue, equipment hire, and any managerial or secretarial expenses that this might incur. I would also strongly encourage you to put in a contingency amount as well, because as I'm sure you're aware, when you're doing projects or you've got money, things happen that you hadn't planned for. So make sure you've got a contingency amount of money that's there, just in case. Does anybody have any questions there? Because I think we're coming to the end now. Let's have a look. Yes. So that's the application form in a nutshell. Now is an opportunity. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So now is an opportunity for you to ask any questions that you want. So use the chat box below, and I'll do my best to see. I'll answer your questions. If you have any, of course. Any questions? Oh, that's a really tricky question to answer for, Deepak. I think the main, I'm just thinking about, so I think it depends on your needs and what you want. So I don't know. I can tell you that last year we gave funds for some mentors that were over £1 lakh. And then we gave other funds for teachers that were maybe, say, like 40,000 or 50,000 rupees. I think the main thing is that you put together what you think, and when we do our shortlisting process, we will go through that quite carefully. So with some people that they may have asked for a certain amount of money, but then we will write to them saying, we've gone through your proposal and we think this is a more accurate sum of money, and we will give you that. So there can be a bit of negotiation there back and forth. But just put in what you realistically think it is. And if we can see that what you're asking for is realistic and it's fair, then that's what we'll award you if we think your application is going to be successful. No problem. Anybody else have a question? Okay, so if nobody has any more questions, I think we can wrap up the webinar. Once this is finished and downloaded onto my computer, we'll upload it onto the AARMS webpage, and I'll put a link on Facebook. Yeah, everything will be on the webinar. So when you're looking at the slides, you'll be able to pause it and have a look at everything. I could even actually put the slides on the webinar as well. I mean, on the webpage, I can do that. That's not a problem. And so that can be there for your ease of reference. You'll also notice on the last slide, there's my email address. So if you've got any further questions or you're not clear on anything, then by all means email me, and I'll try and help you as best I can. All right. Anything else from anybody else? Okay, so I'm gonna finish there. I'm just gonna say thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate it. I hope you found the webinar to be useful, and obviously I wish you every success with your application. Okay, I'm gonna say goodbye now. Okay, bye-bye.